I rise today to express my deep disappointment with the current immigration reform legislation and the extremely limited opportunity for senators to amend this bill. Although I was not a member of the United States Senate in 2009, I watched the debate on Obamacare closely. I was amazed that the world's greatest deliberative body could vote on such a massive change to federal policy without having time to read or adequately amend the bill. Failure to fully comprehend the consequences, intended or otherwise, left many Americans skeptical, and rightfully so. We were told the need to act justified passage of this massive bill, and we were admonished that we needed to pass the bill to find out what's in it. The American people were not pitched sound policy. The American people were pitched sound bites. Public polling suggests the American people still haven't bought it, and with good reason. Just a few years later, Americans are just starting to learn the devastating, real-life impact of the flawed health care policy, including the loss of current benefits and the sticker shock of rising premiums. The litany of broken promises seem endless. Yet here we are again, another dire problem in desperate need of a solution, and this time it's immigration. I agree, and Nebraskans agree, that we must address the problem of illegal immigration. The status quo is unacceptable. Our border remains dangerously insecure, and 11 million illegal immigrants currently enjoy de facto amnesty. We are told, Madam President, that there is only but one solution, or rather, we are only allowed to vote on one solution that has been agreed upon behind closed doors by the majority leader and a small group of senators. We are told we have no choice but to pass this bill. The pundits in Washington, they tell us that failure to pass comprehensive immigration reform will leave the Republican Party in an uncertain electoral wilderness. Well, I, for one, am more concerned about the future of this nation, the future America I will leave to my children and my grandchildren, than I am about any political party's electoral prospects. We are told that simply devoting tens of billions of dollars with no plan, that will solve the problem. We've tried throwing big money at big problems in the past. You know, it didn't work then, and it won't work now. Some have suggested that there has been plenty of time to read and revise this bill. They argue that there's only 119 pages of changes that have been added to the 1,200-page piece of legislation before us. But those changes, they're spread across and throughout the entire language of this bill. There's been little fixes here and there. But if you blink, you might miss an important word that's been dropped or a clause that's been added, and the result is a lasting effect on generations to come. Some of these changes include special carve-outs, similar to the Cornhusker kickback, that helped bring Obamacare across the finish line. Nebraskans know exactly what I'm talking about. These new carve-outs include special treatment for the seafood industry, special treatment for Hollywood, and extensions of the failed stimulus program. I'm disappointed that the majority leader has once again rushed a bill of this magnitude and impact. is just another artificial deadline imposed by the leader, just so members can make it back for some backyard barbecues. That's disappointing. I don't sit on the Judiciary Committee. The only opportunity I and 82 other members of the United States Senate have to offer amendments to reform the flawed aspects of this bill is through floor debate. Yet we're being denied that opportunity by the Majority Leader. So far, we've only voted on 9. That's 9 amendments. Given the emotional, controversial, and the complicated nature of this issue, reforms are not made easily. We have a duty to make sure that we get it right and that we avoid the mistakes of the past. I've always believed that before we address any form of legislation that deals with the legalization for our undocumented population, we must first fully secure the border. Without a fully secure border, the United States will find itself in the same dire straits down the road. Yet the amendment offered by Senators Schumer-Corker-Hoeven falls short of this very necessary goal. We need a proposal that brings about verifiable, measurable results along the southern border. I support a carefully crafted border security plan that is strategy-driven, cost-effective, accountable, and responsive to the needs of law enforcement officials. And those law enforcement officials have expressed concerns with the legislation before us. The Schumer-Corker-Hoeven amendments attempt to reach a compromise on border security metrics has resulted in vague, ineffective standards. The border security amendment I filed would provide needed oversight to ensure border security goals are being achieved and maintained in a timely fashion. It requires the Secretary of Homeland Security.
Madam President,
the Majority Leader.
could I ask the distinguished senator from Nebraska for me to offer a unanimous consent request?
Yes.
Without objection.
I, of course, express my appreciation to the senator for her courtesy, and I ask unanimous consent that her statement not appear interrupted in the record.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that notwithstanding Rule 22 at 2:15 today, the Senate proceed to executive session to consider calendar number 180 under the previous order.
Without objection.
For the information of all senators, at 2:15 there will be 30 minutes for debate, followed by a vote on the confirmation of Penny Pritzker to be Secretary of Commerce.
Without objection. Senator from Nebraska.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Majority Leader. I was speaking about the border security amendment that I have filed and comparing that to what we are currently seeing in the proposed legislation before us. The amendment that I have filed provides needed oversight to ensure border security goals are being achieved and maintained in a timely fashion. It requires that the Secretary of Homeland Security and the Commissioner of Customs and Border Patrol submit a written certification that all border goals have been met. The Homeland Security Inspector General must also sign off on certification. And finally, congressional approval must be obtained. Importantly, the definition of operational control in my amendment would maintain current law's definition rather than watering it down. But my amendment hasn't received a vote, Madam President. The Schumer-Corker-Hoeven amendment also fails to require a biometric entry and exit system at land, air, and seaports. Instead, it simply provides a basic electronic screening system, and only at sea and airports, not land ports of entry. This is absolutely unacceptable, and it is remarkably weaker than the border security provisions in the 2006 and 2007 comprehensive immigration bills, which required implementation of a biometric entry-exit system. The border security amendment I filed implements a biometric entry-exit system at all points and ports of entry. But my amendment hasn't received a vote. Border security is a question of national security. It's not a position that can be watered down or compromised. The Schumer-Corker-Hoeven amendment does just that. We also need to make sure that we are being fiscally responsible. Last time I checked, we are still $17 trillion in debt. Yet this amendment throws $46.3 billion at border security with no plan from the Department of Homeland Security detailing how that money is going to be used. There is no clear justification for the amount detailed in this request. There is absolutely no strategy driving this funding request. There is also not nearly enough accountability. The reporting requirements to Congress are toothless. I reject, and I suspect Nebraskans reject, the idea that massive amounts of spending alone are the solution to our border security problem. In addition to the lack of strategy behind the funding, I'm concerned that this legislation provides legalization first and border security second. Specifically, this legislation creates a loophole allowing certain people who have overstayed their non-immigrant visas to obtain a green card without returning home. The Schumer-Corker-Hoeven amendment also creates a number of loopholes for criminal aliens to remain in our country. Under their proposal, the Secretary of Homeland Security has broad authority to waive deportations for certain criminal activity. For example, it would allow many members of criminal gangs to gain entry and the legal right to remain in the country. In a written statement, Immigration and Customs Enforcement Council President Chris Crane stated, and I quote, "The 1,200-page substitute bill before the Senate will provide instant legalization and a path to citizenship to gang members and other dangerous criminal aliens, and handcuff ICE officers from enforcing immigration laws in the future. It provides no means of effectively enforcing visa overstays, which account for almost half of the nation's illegal immigration crisis," close quote. The list of problems, Madam President, goes on. In short, this legislation and the Schumer-Corker-Hoeven amendment remains fatally flawed. The American people demand, and they deserve, a better policy. I'm committed to working on lasting solutions that will reform our immigration system once and for all. But let me be clear, I will not support legislation simply because it might be vogue or politically expedient or could ingratiate me with the Inside the Beltway Club. I vote for legislation if it is sound policy and if it will improve the lives of hardworking taxpayers and if it reflects the values of Nebraskans. And this legislation, Madam President, has a long ways to go.